Hey guys, we're back for chapter 8. Would you like to see my Mickey Mouse glass? Check that out. Can you see that? Am I close enough? I've got some water because I do have some sinus ickiness. All our trees are budding because spring is here, yes. And so I've got a little bit of a trickle in my throat. All right, so we are back for chapter 8. And chapter 8 is called Commander-in-Chief. Washington's peaceful life at Mount Vernon was interrupted by the momentous political events in American colonial life that led to the American Revolution. Many serious disagreements had arisen between faraway England and the colonies. As the Americans sought more freedom and self-government, men like George Washington, who had natural leadership abilities, were pushed to the forefront of political activity. By 1763, the Redcoats had taken control of almost all of North America. The 9-year campaign had cost a great deal of money, and England taxed its American colonies to help pay off the war debts. "No taxation without representation," the colonists thundered. This became one of the most popular slogans of the American Revolution. It was a protest against paying taxes to a foreign country, especially because representatives of the colonies were not permitted to vote on any issues or to help shape the very laws by which England ruled them. While Patrick Henry and other colonial leaders protested the taxes by making angry speeches, Washington took action. Going around Virginia, he persuaded about 1,000 colonists to sign a pledge not to import any item from England on which the English Parliament had placed a tax. In response to these rising protests, the British canceled all the taxes except the one on tea. They regarded this as a symbol of their continuing control over the colonies. The colonists expressed their outrage in an event known as the Boston Tea Party. Late one night in December 1773, a group of colonists in Boston, disguised as Mohawk Indians, climbed aboard 3 British cargo ships and tossed 350 boxes of tea into the harbor. As punishment for this act, England closed the port of Boston, dispatched troops to seize control of the city, and took harsh measures against other American colonies. This harsh reaction fed the fires of the American Revolution. We have an illustration of the Boston Tea Party. Which way do I need to go? The royal governor disbanded the Virginia Assembly when it attempted to pass a resolution in support of the Boston colonists. In response, 25 burgesses, including George Washington, met privately and decided to call a meeting of the Assembly independently of the governor. Hearing about this, George William Fairfax wrote to Washington to express concern. "I remain firmly opposed to violence to resolve this dispute," he stated in his letter. "I share your concern," replied Washington, "but I see no hope for a peaceful solution. We have addressed the English Parliament and received no satisfaction." Washington had never before allowed a political dispute or other difference of opinion destroy a friendship, but this time his mind was set. On August 1st, 1774, in Williamsburg, he announced at a meeting of the Virginia Assembly that, "I am ready to raise 1,000 men, provide for their needs at my own expense, and march as their head to Boston." He was one of 7 Virginians chosen to represent the colony in the First Continental Congress, which assembled in Philadelphia in 1774. It's a good illustration where they say he's saying he's ready to march. Washington was in the company of some of the best public speakers in colonial America. While other delegates made long-winded pronouncements and engaged in noisy debates, this giant man observed the proceedings in almost total silence. During the nightly strategy sessions that followed each day's public statements, Washington played a key role. He exercised remarkable influence on his colleagues. Patrick Henry himself regarded Washington as the greatest man in the Congress. Of Washington, Henry said, "If the criterion for greatness is an eloquent speech, other men must be cited. George Washington doesn't pretend to be an eloquent speaker, but he has better judgment and more solid information on the events of our time than does any other man in the Congress." The delegates to the First Continental Congress expressed their determination to stand and fight together against the English rule. The Second Continental Congress, to which Washington was also elected, adopted the same position. On April 9, 1775, before the Second Congress met, a clash between American militiamen and English soldiers erupted at Lexington and Concord in the colony of Massachusetts. This was the first bloodshed, the spark that ignited the American Revolution. The time has now definitely come to raise an army to defend the colonies against British power, declared the American revolutionaries. But who shall lead us? The name raised most often was that of George Washington. He was regarded as the wisest and the bravest soldier in the colonial America. Washington arrived at the opening session of the Second Continental Congress dressed in the blue and tan uniform of the Virginian militia. He restated his willingness and ability to lead an army against British-occupied Boston. But representatives of the New England colonies opposed the Southerner for the command of an army whose first task was to free their own northern territories from the Redcoats. Despite the objections of some New Englanders, Washington was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, a position that he held for 8 years. Washington's acceptance speech was typically short and to the point, but was not entirely lacking in eloquence. "Thank you, gentlemen. I am greatly honored for the trust that you have placed in me. I am especially honored to carry a title that is bestowed by a free people rather than by the head of a foreign power." He also spoke about times past when members of his family had to purchase commissions in the Royal Army. "My only concern," Washington continued, "is that my abilities and military experience may not be sufficient to enable me to successfully carry out the task that you have given me. I declare, however, that I shall use every bit of the power in me to support the glorious cause of American independence." Lawrence would be so proud of me now, George thought, fighting back the tears that welled up in his eyes. "And I wish so much that he were here to advise me. I have never commanded any unit larger than a regiment. Yet here I am, preparing to challenge the most powerful empire in the world." Washington refused to accept any salary for his new position, which was by far the most challenging and difficult of any missions he had ever undertaken. He asked that Congress only repay him for his expenses. Here is an illustration of George Washington. Washington now faced a major turning point in his life. Having spent many years in the comfort of his home and his family, he was about to return to military life. Compared with his new assignment, the war against the French and Indians on the western frontier was easy. This time Washington would have to defeat the feared Redcoats, the strongest army in the world. The fact that he had once fought on their side gave him some understanding of their military strategy and tactics. But above all, he had some mixed feelings about going sword to sword against his former allies. I could be accused of treason, of betraying my country, Washington thought to himself as he prepared to commit the ultimate act of disloyalty to the English king. An undertaking against the mother country, that's what they called England, was a tremendous decision. But the American colonies, represented by their delegates in the Continental Congress, were determined to fight and win. And if anyone could bring them victory, it was the brilliant and courageous George Washington. After dutifully accepting the leadership of the colonial army, Washington's thoughts turned to his family. He first wrote to his wife, for whom the separation would be most difficult. "My dear Patsy," he wrote, using his affectionate nickname for Martha, "please believe me when I assure you that I did not seek this assignment. On the contrary, I did everything in my power to avoid it. Not only am I unhappy about leaving you behind, but I also fear that I may not have the ability to perform successfully. Nevertheless, it would have been utterly impossible for me to refuse the position without bringing dishonor upon my name and pain to my friends." Washington also wrote to his favorite brother Jack, "I must now bid farewell to the comforts of home for a long while. I am about to embark on a dangerous mission, and I do not know the time or place of its ending. It is like setting sail on a vast ocean in which there is no safe port. All I ask is that you visit Martha often during my absence. Your company will ease her pain and loneliness." His feelings for Martha had grown increasingly over the years. They were reflected in the brief note he sent her from his army post on the eve of the war. "I maintain a deep affection for you that neither time nor distance will change." With those words, George Washington, the 43-year-old Virginia gentleman, rode north to take command of the colonial army outside British-occupied Boston. It was June 17, 1775. And that, my friends, is the end of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 is called The American Revolution, and we'll be back to read that. Bye, guys.